following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago.
Tonight, Cabrini-Green, the notorious housing project, was once home to 15,000 people. Today, a new Target store is going up on the site. So what happened to all of those residents? And what's become of Chicago's plan to transform public housing?
The Chicago Board of Education rings the final bell on the biggest school closing in the city's history. 50 schools will be out of business. What that means for students, parents, and teachers.
Taking aim at ammunition sales in Illinois, the Senate about to take up legislation to ban high-capacity ammunition clips. How emotional testimony from Sandy Hook families helped move the measure forward.
And Governor Quinn sends a stern message to those who organize violent flash mobs on social media. Do it and you'll be breaking a new law. These stories and much more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening, I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Tonight we take an in-depth look at efforts to radically change public housing in Chicago.
This week, the Chicago Housing Authority approved a new plan outlining its vision for the future. But dramatic differences are already taking hold in Chicago neighborhoods where the CHA has been overhauling public housing over the last 14 years.
The CHA's ambitious aim was to house poor families side by side with working professionals in newly constructed complexes. The price tag, $1.6 billion.
But is it working? We visited several CHA housing sites and tracked down residents in the city and suburbs to find out.
My mom got shot sitting in the living room one night.
Maddie Rice remembers vividly how bad things were at the CHA's Henry Horner Homes on Chicago's West Side, where she lived with her mother for 23 years.
We was preparing dinner. The bullets started flying. One came through my living room window and hit her.
Things got better for Maddie and her elderly mother after the CHA plan changed their lives. They moved into a new development called West Haven, low-rise buildings that replaced the high-rises of Henry Horner Homes. Public housing residents such as Maddie and her mother live next door to tenants who pay market rents. Despite the improvements, Maddie says some of the old problems linger.
We have a park, 10:30, 11. Everyone's supposed to be out the park. They take over the park area, still drug selling.
To the north, the notorious Cabrini-Green. High-rise buildings once stood in these empty fields. Home to more than 3,000 families, they became synonymous with poverty, gangs, and gunfire. CHA resident Robert Williams, a retired chef, remembers all too well.
Hell, like hell it was. It was bad, you know. A lot of gunplay, gun violence, and things like that.
Williams has lived in the only surviving remnant of Cabrini-Green, these old row houses, for 45 years. Now many of them are vacant and boarded up. The others will eventually be demolished. Some residents are suing the CHA to prevent being forced out. But several new mixed-income housing complexes now stand not far from where the last Cabrini Towers came down 2 years ago. Williams was happy to see them go.
I felt good. I felt good about that. Still do. Glad they're gone.
Just a block away, a new sign of affluence is rising from the very block where a Cabrini-Green tower once stood. The Target store, now being built, is among many developments changing the face of a place once known for pervasive poverty and high crime. Now, expensive cars, luxury condos, and family pets are dotting a neighborhood where residents once dodged bullets.
It's getting better all the time. I can see that myself because for so many years I prayed to see some change come, you know, and it come.
A lot of people didn't think that they could get anywhere with it. This was hugely complex.
Charles Woodyard heads the CHA. He says its new focus will be on improving the neighborhoods around public housing.
We've also got to put retail, particularly food services, other commercial uses, laundry facilities. We need recreation facilities, cultural facilities.
Chicago's public housing chief also wants to make those areas safer, a big concern among parents, including former CHA resident Connie Moore.
There hasn't been the gunfire and the shootings and having to grab the kids and run.
After years of living in CHA housing, Connie now lives on a quiet street in South suburban University Park. She credits the CHA program for her success. She learned how to write a resume, dress for success, and land a job.
If I had not went through those programs, I can't say that I would be here.
For Connie, the CHA was always just a temporary stepping stone to something better. Tending to the yard in front of her little house in the suburbs, she has big plans for the future.
Traveling, I want to see the world. I want to see everything that God has given us to see.
A new study from the Urban Institute gives the CHA overhaul generally high marks, but some longtime residents are still fighting the changes in court. WBEZ reporter Natalie Moore has covered the CHA extensively over the last few years and joins us now with more. Welcome, Natalie.
Good to be here.
This was a huge change, one of the biggest ever in the United States. Give us a sense of the scope of this.
You're absolutely right. This has been the biggest public works for a public housing development in the country. Some people may remember what the Dan Ryan corridor looked like. All those buildings from Stateway Gardens, Robert Taylor homes, they were just as much a part of the city skyline as, the Sears Tower and some of the downtown buildings were back then. And they started coming down around 1999, and that was called the Plan for Transformation. And Richard M. Daley got permission from Washington, D.C. to do this massive overhaul that demolished a lot of our public housing stock with the promise of building mixed income communities.
So tens of thousands of people were displaced in this process.
Yes, they were moved out of their apartments.
And how many of those tens of thousands of people are back in public housing now?
So the promise that CHA gave back in 1999 was to redo 25,000 units that could be rehab in your traditional public housing, such as the low rises at Loudon Homes on 95th Street or Oakdale Gardens or Trumbull Homes on the southeast side. And then there were the properties that were mixed income, like your Robert Taylor, which is now called Park Boulevard. The Stateway Gardens is called Park Boulevard, and then you had the Cabrini, which we just saw. So those were the high rises that were coming down, and a third mixed in, a third was the formula.
A third for the new housing.
Right, so a third public housing, a third affordable, a third market rate. So only a fraction of those families who were living, let's say, on the Robert Taylor footprint were able to come back. And that project still isn't completed. So you have a lot of residents who were also lost by CHA back in 1999, the early 2000s. And then you have a big chunk who are living in vouchers, and those allow you to live in the private market on subsidized, at cheaper rents. What
was the whole idea or the philosophy behind this new housing, where you say there was a mix of a third, and a third of affordable housing, a third of people who pay the market rents, and a third that are totally subsidized? What was the idea here?
CHA has said that this plan for transformation, this billion-dollar plan, was to deconcentrate poverty and to have poor people living with working families and among professionals. Now, there was no real scientific research to come up with a third. And I've done some reporting that has showed that some properties aren't sticking to that mix. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because what works in Oakwood Shores, where the old Ida B. Wells is, may not work in Cabrini. And you also have the economic downturn that has severely stymied progress on this. We already have so many condos. So are you going to build more condos in an area that doesn't even have a grocery store, like in some of the pockets on the south side? So some units have gone to rental instead of being, sold to homeowners. So there's been a lot of reconfiguration, and that kind of leads us to where we are today with the CHA passing this new plan forward.
Their new plan forward, the whole idea supposedly is to, now that they've accomplished building new houses, to build up some communities around them.
Right, and let's be clear, there are a lot of projects that are still not finished, and then there are like the Cabrini row houses, the people there are suing because they want to make sure they stay row houses. And then you have on the north side, Lathrop Homes, Altgeld is still kind of figuring out what's going to happen. So, you know, all the housing is not complete. But when you have mixed income areas, I'll go back to the Oakwood Shores example. You have some new housing, you have some new parks, but there's no place to get a grocery, you know, to get healthy food.
So these places are sort of little islands.
They're little islands, and CHA rightfully understands that there have to be some amenities that are built up. You just can't put housing in and expect market rate people to move in or expect poor people to suddenly have a new lease on life when they're still being underserved.
So has the problem been attracting businesses that want to come to these areas?
I think so. I mean, you look at Cabrini on the near north side, not far from the Gold Coast, that was prime real estate. And so, you know, some people have said
that's where you have the Target now.
That's what's coming there. But, you know, development on the south side has always been a little bit more elusive, I think, because of the racial factor and the stigma of some of those communities, even though you are still getting in people with higher incomes. These are not all poor communities, but that retail piece has been hard, and CHA owns a lot of vacant land, enough that's about the size of Grant Park.
So that's a huge amount of vacant land, which they could sell off or develop, or
and
what?
They're looking at not just doing housing on some of that land, what kind of amenities, what kind of businesses can they bring in?
So when you look at this, and you've covered it now for a couple of years, do you agree with the Urban Institute that it's been largely a success?
Oh, that's a hard question.
I know you're a reporter.
I will say that the Urban Institute was very critical in the early years. I will say that CHA has made some adaptations, giving services to residents. You have a population that has a lot going against them, such as, you know, no education, poor literacy skills, and you throw them into the private market, or you expect them to suddenly do well now that you've taken away their housing. And so CHA has stepped in and done a lot more. And this plan has been this, you know, document, so to speak, but really a living document. And originally this plan was supposed to be 5 years, and now we're up to 15. And I wouldn't be surprised if it goes even longer. Again, this is such a massive plan, and, you know, CHA had to be more than an apartment builder in this process.
Taken, as you say, it's taken a lot longer than anybody expected.
Right.
Natalie, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. Months of protests, hearings, angry words, even tears. Now some parents, students, and educators must face a new reality of far fewer public schools in Chicago. Here's Barbara with more.
4 schools slated for closing were spared, but 50 others are slated to shut down for good at the end of the school year after a final vote by the Chicago Board of Education. They're moving forward with the largest school closure plan in city history. Joining me tonight to talk about the decision and other trending stories are comedy producer Mike Oquendo, Cliff Kelley, host of The Cliff Kelley Show on WVON 1690 AM, and Cathryn Biga, vice president of the Chicago Young Republicans. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you.
Well, the final vote came yesterday after 5 months of heated protests, emotional meetings, and I'm just wondering, Cliff, do you think that the pressure from all of the marches and meetings and protests made any difference?
No, I don't think so. It would have if we had an elected school board like most cities do have, and which we certainly should have. That's something that, this is the mayor's deal. He appoints the board, and that's it. He also brings in the CEO. And I do believe that Miss Barbara Byrd Bennett wanted to do the right thing. She got a delay from the Illinois General Assembly in order to have these hearings. But I think that most people by now understand that the hearings didn't really mean anything. When you have judges, former judges, as hearing officers, and they put in good time and so forth and came out and wrote opinions, and they were told that you overstepped your authority, that tells you a lot right there. This is Emmanuel's deal, and what happens, we'll see.
Well, the judges had questions about 13 schools of the 54, and 4 are remaining open. Mike, does that say they listened somewhat, or do you feel the same way Cliff does about the fact that voices were not heard?
Yeah, I don't think it was a complete waste of time. It was interesting to watch. It was exciting to watch the parents mobilize the way that they did, and I'm proud of those parents who decided to say, hey, let's get out there and let's do something. I don't know that they listened. It'd be interesting to see what the dynamics were behind the decisions on those 4 schools, because those aren't really disclosed. What was the pressure? Whether there was pressure or not? What was the reason that how did they come to the decision on that? But the parents, you know, you have to applaud their efforts in getting out there. It's kind of a sad thing to admit, but it doesn't appear that those hearings were any more than things that they had to do to make peace. You know, I think they might have just very well have wasted, not that they did, but wasted the time of the parents and the people who mobilized. But the parents who did come out should be, you know, acknowledged and applauded.
Cathryn, do you think that both sides here are saying they're doing what's best for the children? How do you see it?
Well, this is definitely a tough position for Mayor Emanuel to be in, where it's talking about economic efficiency versus the community. And so, you know, we want to do what's best for the kids, but we also have to think about the state and taxpayers, and is it fair to the taxpayers? So I definitely feel emotions towards both sides of the fence. Do I think we're doing the best things for the kids? You know, taking a kid out of their community and having parents not have enough parental rights over their neighborhood and their neighborhood communities and schools. That's very difficult. But I also think there's 2 sides to the coin, where we have to think about the fiscal state of our state. And this is going to be the future for these kids if we don't get this fiscal house in order. So we have to think about that as well. I think we're doing something for the kids by making some changes that need to be made.
Cliff, you look like you were about to say something. Jump in, please.
No, it's just interesting. The Illinois Constitution, Article 10, says that every child in this state has to have a free public school education. And so in order to do that, you know, they're going to talk about standardized test scores. They're sending some children to schools that have lower test scores than the ones they're leaving. This whole thing is just ridiculous. The good thing it's done, and I agree with him that it has gotten people together. Reminds me of what happened, the reason Harold Washington was elected. Jane Byrne got people involved in politics too, and that's definitely what this has done. Yeah. This is done. In fact, there's going to be a meeting tonight relative to training for deputy registrars.
Yes, I was going to say, speaking of politics.
That's right. This is political.
This is very political.
This is the only upside to this I have seen. Yeah. I think it's going to be very meaningful. With you, I congratulate the parents and everyone else. There are some people who were involved that aren't even parents.
That's right.
But because the schools are a neighborhood thing, and a lot of people in the neighborhoods without children were still involved, and I think it's waking up a lot of people. It's going to be a very. When you saw all those aldermen coming before the board, you know, they understand. That's why you need an elected board. But this is not going to work. I don't think. It may eventually work, but not because this has happened.
Now, Mayor Emanuel said he can take the heat. He said he was ready to stand up and take the heat for all of this. Cathryn, can he afford to?
Absolutely. He can afford to take the heat. I mean, he needs to govern this city, so he needs to make tough decisions, and this is one of them that he has to make. He wanted to be in this position as mayor. Yeah, he needs to make these tough decisions, and he needs to take the heat, and he can.
How damaging will this be long term, though?
Well, the mayor needs a softer side. I mean, this was a real bully thing in the eyes of most people. Most teachers, most people in the community, that's their thing, is that this was way, way too hard of a hit with what appeared to be no empathy and just no real feeling for the parents in the community. He should have been on TV more. There should have been more, and not his staff, but not PR people, but there should have been more from the mayor. It just appeared a real bully move. And I think that's where the teachers and the parents are kind of like, wow, you know, this is it. Somebody said yesterday, if you were the CEO of 49 companies that weren't doing well, what would you do? Well, I don't know that I'd wake up in the morning and say tomorrow morning we're shutting it down. Let's talk about how we can make this better, or and I think that they're saying, well, we are doing that. We're saying that we're $1 billion, we're going to save $1 billion, but
no, they're not. The $1 billion isn't even coming,
no.
and some that's not happening now, and some that weren't doing well, we're doing better, but they're being closed.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense. You know, we just celebrated the 30th year of the anniversary of the election of Harold Washington. And one of the things when we were replaying some of the things that he said, don't ever let the mayor control your school system. Any mayor, don't let, and that's a good point, and I think it certainly is true.
Don't let government control.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. When those board members gave their comments after all of this, all of these very emotional comments that were made, it was obvious that those comments were made even before those people came before the board.
Yeah,
I mean, this is a done deal.
That's right.
But I wonder what would have been the alternative
The
if we didn't
alternative
have
would
to
have
close
been-
all these schools?
You
What would have been the
certainly
alternative?
didn't have to close them all. Some of them are improving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some are sending people from one school to another that isn't as good as the one they're leaving.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, so
That's exactly right.
that's the fact. So
Yeah.
this whole thing is what I think Barbara Byrd Bennett tried to do the right thing. I think she got an extension. And don't forget, Barbara, there's something else here. There are two federal cases that have been filed.
Right, we'll see if
So
that
that's right. This is not
stops
this is,
any of this,
This is
or-
not a done deal by any means.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see if any of those suits put this on hold for a while.
Right.
Or
A moratorium also is being asked for the Illinois General Assembly. They have something to say about
this
that.
isn't over. We'll move on now to another controversial decision about to be made in the Senate, a bill to ban the sale of ammunition magazines containing more than 10 bullets. Now, parents of 2 of the Newtown children came here and made emotional pleas to the Senate. And one legislator called this bill the perfect blend of gun rights and public safety. Mike, is it?
Well, 1 bullet is too many for me. I mean, I come from a community. I'm saying it's the truth. I mean, I come from a community where we have rampant gun violence, and a lot of kids are getting killed every day. And I understand that that's not, it's not the cure-all. But I don't think that any of this is harming anybody's right to bear arms, and it's a step in the right direction. And I'm glad that at least it's being addressed.
Cathryn, do you agree?
I do and I don't. I just wonder, with gun restriction, it doesn't eliminate criminals. I mean, we're still going to have criminals doing things, and we're still going to have a lot of problems. I think the magazine restriction is not a bad idea. When you had someone like Adam Lanza coming into the schools and having the amount of guns that he had, and that, I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea. But I get back to, I don't want government coming into my life and encroaching and saying, this is too much, this is too little. So.
Yeah, Cliff, the NRA says basically there are already too many high-capacity magazines out there. Laws like this that exist in 10 other states do little to impact crime. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm for concealed carry, but as far as having magazines with over 10 rounds, I don't think that's necessary. I don't have a problem with that. I don't think that has an impact on people who are going to carry arms. So I don't think that's a big problem. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Okay, moving forward to another law that the governor signed. Just in time for the summer tourist season, Governor Quinn signed a bill into law that would try to rein in some of the flash mob activity that we've seen in the Loop, most likely on Michigan Avenue. If you're caught using Twitter, Facebook, other social media to organize what's called mob action, you could now face up to 6 years in jail. Cliff, is this a good way to go? Is this a law that will make a difference?
No, I don't think so at all. I think there are going to be a lot of innocent people who are going to be swept up in this. We saw what happened the other day where this lady on the Meg Mile said that these people came and surrounded her and took her necklace, and it was worth, what, $280,000? Yeah, whatever, and $2,000 that she was carrying around. Turned out it was all a lie.
It was a lie, yeah.
Yeah, it's all a lie. And how do you prove that anyway? If somebody is walking by and they get swept up, how do you prove that they were involved in a flash mob that was created by social media? I think this is ridiculous. I think it's a terrible law.
But Mike, you're
and you
shaking
got to
your
put
head.
more young people in prison? We don't need that.
Yeah.
6 years? You can murder somebody and get away with less than 6 years. Makes no sense.
But don't you think it will help deter
No,
some
I'm
people?
I'm not sure it
by
will,
knowing
because
that
a lot of people are not going to be there based on trying to be in a mob. I'm just concerned about the people who aren't going to be in a mob, who are going to be swept up by this law. And you know who they're going to be. They're going to be minority children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listen, if 7 of my friends send out a message, let's get together at Wrigley Field this week, and we meet another 22 people, and 40 of us are going up and down Clark and Addison, I mean, what's a flash mob? They haven't been able to decide what a flash mob is. There's only one color to the flash mob that I can, this woman who made this whole story up, 8 African-American boys in the middle of the afternoon.
All a lie.
Here's the thing. Governor Quinn needs to, are we going to send her an invoice for the amount of resources that went in to try to find these 8 black boys who robbed her in the middle of the day, and then she made it up? That story went away, and the reason that story went away was because 2 days later, that's when this legislation story got hot and heavy. So they figured, okay, well, she was not good for this this story,
exactly.
right? But why is it only Michigan Avenue? This is a Michigan Avenue Merchants Association fight. Where else is this happening? Where are these flash mobs?
It's a good question. We're going to have to leave it at that because we're out of time. Mike Oquendo, Cliff Kelley, Cathryn Biga, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
Chicago has its own style. Just look at our pizza, our politics, and our softball. We don't play just any softball. We play with a ball that's bigger and some would argue better. Why 16 inches? WBEZ steps up to the plate to answer that question on this week's Curious City.
I was looking at the people playing softball. I'm like, that's not how I've played it. The balls are huge. People don't have gloves. And I was just curious why.
You take that ball anywhere else throughout the country and they look at it and they say, what, that's a melon. How you guys play with that ball?
For all of our leagues and for 16 inch especially, start with a 1-on-1 count, 1 ball, 1 strike. First time players, that's a tough one to get used to. You get up there and I call strike 2. What? I don't have another strike on me.
I coined the term no gloves, never had them, never will, because that's the way 16 inch softball is supposed to be played.
The sound of the ball on the bat, it's totally different. You get a crack in 12 inch and on this, I don't know, it's kind of a thud.
We are in the bottom of the 9th here. That is all for this week. You are now in the loop.
The conversation continues right now on WYCC.org. I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Until next week, good night.